Some writers, such as the excellent T.K. Hall, seek out analogue processes for their writing, stripping away technology to leave only the page and the pen in their mind. That's never been me. I'm a tinkerer and have always loved technology. And incorporating tech into my workflow has been an essential part of my writing. Today I'm outlining the various hardware, software and services I use to write and publish. There's nothing particularly revolutionary in here, but I'm hoping that having it all in one place might be useful for anyone else doing similar work. As a writer of weekly serials, I have specific requirements for my writing process. Writing fast is essential, but in a way that somehow doesn't overly compromise quality. I need to be able to edit and redraft rapidly. Keeping track of multiple plot threads and character arcs is vital if the story is going to be coherent and satisfying for readers. I need to be able to publish quickly and easily direct to my readers with minimal algorithmic shenanigans. I want to be able to provide audio readings of chapters for accessibility and convenience, like what you're listening to right now. Creating occasional ebook collections and print editions of collected works is increasingly important and something I really want to do more of this year. Those print and ebook editions then need to be printed on demand and distributed automatically. I don't want boxes and boxes of stock filling up my house. There's already too much Transformers and Lego in here. I want the most enthusiastic readers to be able to support my writing through paid subscriptions, but in a flexible way that doesn't punish those who can't afford it, or just don't want to pay. As my back catalogue grows, I want it to be easily accessible and discoverable. Not asking for much then. Over the last 4 years, I've settled into an efficient and road-tested setup, so here it is. Starting with software, and up front we have Scrivener, which is £55 or about $59, I believe. And this is the super weapon. Without Scrivener, I would struggle to write the stories that I write. To be more precise, writing does not require technology. A pen and paper is fine. If Scrivener didn't exist, I'd still be a writer, obviously, but for working on multi-year, complex weekly serials, complete with large casts and interconnected plot threads that have to make sense, and seed concepts months or years ahead of time, I need a very intricate understanding of what it is I'm creating. And that's where Scrivener comes in. Yes, I could use notebooks and post-it notes, I could use Word or Google Docs, but it's Scrivener that keeps it all in one place for me. I've used it for all 4 of my major serial projects, and it's never let me down. Touch wood. Scrivener doesn't make me a better writer, but it definitely makes me a less stressed writer. It takes care of a lot of the technical complexity of an ongoing serial, leaving me to focus on the story. It's also insanely cheap for a professional tool. I write about using it more in the newsletter, so if you head to simonkjones.substack.com and just search for Scrivener, you'll find a whole load of resources. Next up we have Canva and Affinity, both of which are free. Canva has paid plans as well. I used Affinity long before it was bought by Canva and turned into a free product. It was a good deal back when you had to pay for it, and the free version is absurdly good. It's a genuine alternative to Photoshop, Illustrator and InDesign, and you're not locked into a horrible Adobe subscription that locks all of your files away if you ever decide to go somewhere else. Being owned by a tech company, namely Canva, that sells subscriptions does make me nervous though. I fully expect Canva to enshitify the product at some point. Until then though, it's a phenomenal tool for creating images, ebooks, covers and interiors. When Affinity itself, the studio product you can download to your computer, is overkill, I sometimes just hop over into Canva for quick layout projects. Next up is Clip Studio Paint Pro, which I think is about $58 or $26 on an annual recurring basis. For digital art, I prefer Clip Studio Paint over Affinity. It enables more naturalistic drawing and painting and is available in every platform, including tablets. I want at some point to work on comics, and CSP is what I'll be using, as it has built-in features to help with panel layout, dialogue bubbles, and so on. It does have a slightly convoluted payment setup. You can buy a perpetual license, which is great, or subscribe for monthly/annual plans, and there's 2 distinct versions, Pro and EX. EX has more features around comic creation and animation, and is also considerably more expensive, but the sort of standard Pro version is just jam-packed full of good stuff. Then there's Audacity, which is free. This is open source audio editing, nuts and bolts stuff, and it's what I turn to when recording and editing article voiceovers, like this one. It's quick and simple to use. I've got more information on making a simple, cheapo podcast over on the newsletter as well. Okay, moving on to platforms and services. So we have Substack, which is free to use. Kinda. I'll get to that in a sec. This newsletter that you're reading and this podcast audio that you're listening to is powered by Substack. And to be clear, I very rarely describe this as my Substack. You get a lot of people who are like, oh, go and read my Substack. I kind of think that kind of blind brand loyalty is only asking for trouble when we operate in this late-stage capitalist hellhole. It's my newsletter, and I happen to use Substack. That said, the Substack toolkit is a remarkable thing. I can publish my writing, broadcast live streams, distribute video and podcasts, host chats with subscribers, and build a list of free and paying subscribers. There's very little in the way of platform lock-in. I can take my subscriber list and go elsewhere whenever I want. Video and audio is automatically shared to YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and so on. There's a built-in, optional social network called Notes, which is full of interesting people and actively encourages subscriptions. There's no direct cost to me, the creator. Anyone can create a Substack publication for free. If you accept paid subs from your readers, that's when Substack steps in and takes 10% from those subscriptions. Given the depth and quality of the tools, that's a great deal as far as I'm concerned. Larger, more successful publications might want to consider the fixed rate options available on roughly equivalent platforms like Ghost. Substack in 2025 became the big, hyped platform that everyone was jumping on, but that hype isn't mere hyperbole. The platform has been a significant factor in getting to my 9,500 subscribers. I've got a whole load of Substack tutorials too. Just search for Substack over on the newsletter. Next up, we have Google Drive, which is available in various plans that I can't be asked to get into. There's loads of options, some of which are very cheap. I've used Google Drive for years and years. It makes it easy to access my files across devices and also serves as a kind of remote backup. If all my devices got smashed up or my house exploded, I'd have bigger problems to worry about, but my writing would still be in Google Drive. In the last few years, this has become a potential vulnerability. Google has a long reputation of abandoning products. While I don't see them doing that for something as essential and widely used as Drive, they're also a tech company that is swept up in AI hype. Their focus is elsewhere, which makes me nervous. Anyway, I've been looking at open source and European alternatives. Proton seems kind of promising. The actual migration is non-trivial though, and doesn't mean much while I'm still locked into a Microsoft ecosystem, and I'll have more to say on that in a moment. Next up, Ingram Spark. This, for me, is as yet untested directly. So when I self-published No Adults Allowed a couple of years ago, I took the path of least resistance and used Amazon KDP. As a technical test, it was useful, but it has left a kind of unpleasant taste in my mouth. One of the missions for 2026 is to extract No Adults Allowed from Amazon and make it widely available. The best route for doing that appears to be Ingram Spark, which is able to distribute to a wide range of bookshops, online and offline, as well as libraries. None of that happens with Amazon, basically. I'll let you know how I get on with this process as I explore it and give it a go. But in the meantime, there's tons of good tutorials and writing on Ingram Spark if you search about on the internet. And this kind of couples with bookshop.org. Moving away from Amazon requires having an equivalent store to use as a first port of call for readers. Back when I published No Adults Allowed, the options were rather limited, but last year bookshop.org expanded their offering to include ebook sales and distribution. Suddenly, there was an Amazon alternative. I still need to look into the particulars, but Ingram Spark plus bookshop.org seems like a really promising combo. They're also non-exclusive, so anyone who really likes to give Bezos money will still be able to do so. Again, I'll report back as I explore this later in 2026. Next up, we have BookFunnel, which is about $100 per year. It's tempting to see Substack as a guaranteed growth engine, to expect constant success simply by being on the platform. That's not how any of this works, though, and it's up to us, the creators, the writers, to find readers and reach beyond the obvious venues. That's where I found BookFunnel to be very useful over the years. Especially in the first couple of years of writing, BookFunnel found me a foundational reader base. You do need a back catalogue of some sort, or at least the existence of a sample or extract of work, but other than that, it's all very easy to use, and better than raging at the mysteries of Substack's algorithms. $100 annual isn't nothing, obviously, but in my experience, it's a more reliable return on investment than spewing money into Facebook or Amazon ads. I've got a video where I explain what BookFunnel is and how it works. So yeah, head over to the newsletter and search for BookFunnel. Okay, so what about social media? The short answer is that I don't really use social media to promote my newsletter. It simply doesn't perform for me in a useful way, and the effort to share my work on the various social platforms isn't really worth the minimal/non-existent reward. We're long past the age of useful hyperscaling virality via socials. This could vary for you depending on what you write. Mike Sowden has reported having significant success on Threads and Blue Sky, for example. But his brand of optimistic science education is perhaps an easier sell than my weird sci-fi serial fiction. The exception for me is Substack Notes, where there does seem to be a direct correlation between posting and growing the newsletter. Plus, it's a pleasant and interesting community. I learn a lot from reading Notes, and I'm always discovering new writers. That simply doesn't happen on LinkedIn or Blue Sky, let alone any of the other legacy platforms. Incidentally, I really recommend looking at Matt Stassoff. I'm not sure how you say his surname. Stassoff? Let's say Stassoff. Matt Stassoff's latest Social Signals mega presentation, which I linked to over on the newsletter. It's a fascinating kind of vibe check on where we're at with social media and online platforms. He did one in 2024 as well, and this is like an update. It's very long, very silly in places, but really informative. Okay, next. Which AI to use? When talking about tech in 2026, it feels necessary to address the elephant in the room. Which is my preferred LLM? What's best for ideating? Which one is good for creating illustrations? So here's the thing. I used Midjourney a fair bit in 2022 when it first came out. It seemed promising. And then 3 things happened. 1, I became increasingly aware of the ethical and copyright problems around the training datasets. 2, the AI aesthetic became recognizable and generally undesirable. The quality simply isn't there despite a kind of veneer of technical competence. And 3, I realized that I was doing less of my own drawing the more I used Midjourney, which felt very backwards. In February 2023, I made a point of ceasing all use of generative AI. I've got an article all about that if you want to know more. And I did write another article last year, in fact, updating my thoughts on Gen AI, which hadn't really changed that much. I try not to be too knee-jerky about Gen AI or ideological about it. My current opinion is a practical one, really, based on it just not really being fit for purpose, especially for creative activities. It's that ongoing triple whammy of low-quality results, ethical questions, and copyright uncertainty. Ultimately, the inherent design of LLMs is based on a homogenizing smush of massive data, the end result of which is inevitably mediocrity. It's an averaging engine. James Cameron had some interesting thoughts recently on this. Go and search James Cameron AI on YouTube and you should find it. I'm someone whose experience of creativity is that the idea and end result are far less important than the process itself. Gen AI currently inverts that. It posits that the idea, aka the prompt, is the key ingredient, with the final output being the only valuable asset. And that's just not a form of creativity that interests me. So falling back on stock photos can be a bit boring, but I don't think I've ever heard of someone actively avoiding reading an article because it used a stock image. AI images might have the potential for a bigger initial audience draw, but they're also likely to put off a whole bunch of other readers. It comes down to what kind of audience you're looking to cultivate. Once we get past the hype cycle, which might happen as early as this year, perhaps then we'll be able to pluck the genuinely useful AI tools from the wreckage of the industry. Right, let's move on to hardware. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the Remarkable Paper Pro, which starts at a frankly offensive £559, but bear with. This was my big indulgence in 2025. I'd had my eye on e-ink paper tablets for several years, thinking that they would be good additions to my toolkit. I was finally able, after much saving up, to buy a Remarkable Paper Pro, and it hasn't disappointed. As a quick aside, I was only able to afford one of these things thanks to the direct support and generosity I receive from readers of this newsletter. I never expected to be in that position, having started from scratch in 2021. I still have the day job, but it's astonishing to me that I make any money from my writing. What a time to be a writer, eh? So my interest in an e-ink tablet was increased by my chats with TK Hall, in fact. His commitment to a non-digital workflow is deeply appealing, even if it doesn't quite fit with the way my particular brain works. A tablet designed with an analog stripped-back interface seemed like it could bridge the gap, And it has. I use it to keep notes, work out tricky plot points, sketch out upcoming chapters, as well as do the bulk of the actual writing. I always used to write in Scrivener on a laptop, but that always came with the risk of being distracted. The internet was only ever a click away. On the Paper Pro, there's far fewer distractions. It doesn't have apps in the traditional sense, and I can't browse the web. I can read, I can write, I can draw. That's it. Combined with an e-ink screen that doesn't strain my eyes when I'm writing for long stretches, and it's just a lovely experience. It is, of course, a luxury item and absolutely not a necessity. I'm not saying everyone has to go and buy one of these things. But I have been very pleasantly surprised at how it's integrated into my process and made writing even more enjoyable. They have smaller notebook-sized versions now as well, which look pretty nifty, and alternatives are available from the likes of Supernote, some of which are much cheaper. But yeah, I just need to emphasise that this is very optional, and I'm very aware that I'm fortunate to be in the position to have one. Next up is a laptop, and this is probably not optional. As much as I love the Paper Pro, it's no good for handling the business end of things. A proper laptop is required for actually publishing the writing. I have a small Windows laptop with a touch and pen-enabled screen, and it does the job nicely. Most of the software I've mentioned so far works fine on Mac or Windows and doesn't require a supercomputer. I like having a laptop that works with a pen, as it's useful for sketching and illustrating posts, but otherwise, anything that can run a modern web browser is going to work, basically. As I mentioned above regarding Google Drive, my one concern here is using Windows itself. Aside from it becoming increasingly wonky as Microsoft goes all in on Gen AI, there's the risk factor of running a US-based operating system in 2026 and beyond. Just as I would avoid or hesitate having an operating system developed by a Russian or Chinese company, we're unfortunately now in a situation when the same caution has to be applied to the US. I've been looking into open source alternatives, and the switch to Linux is more viable now than it ever has been, but there's still quirks and barriers, such as Scriven not having a native Linux build. Is it Linux or Linux? I always get this wrong. I go with Linux. Let's stick with Linux. Still, the success of things like SteamOS shows that Linux is closer than it's ever been to being a viable option. Europe as a whole is fast-tracking alternatives and a move away from reliance on US tech, but it's going to take a while to spin all of that up. Hopefully the volatile time we're living in will pass, but it would be irresponsible to not be considering escape routes at this point in history. And just to be clear on this point and emphasise what I'm talking about here, I love Americans. Most of the people who read this newsletter and who are listening to this voiceover are from the US, so there's a good chance that you are an American. I've always loved the idea of America. Most of my favourite movies, music and TV shows are from the US. My cultural touchpoints are American, right? My concerns here are not about the American people, but the corrupt and violent bastards that have taken over the country. Hopefully, it's a temporary state of affairs, but the rest of the world can't rest on that assumption. This is kind of what I mean about writing about tech at the moment. It's really hard to separate that from politics, and that's a silly situation to be in. Anyway, moving on. External hard drive backup. So using cloud storage for backup is a no-brainer, but it's also vital to have your own backup solutions. This can be as simple as having an external hard drive and or USB stick. Every couple of months, I copy my books folder over to the external drive, usually in a new folder that's named after the particular month. This way, if something weird happens to my computer and to my Google account, I haven't lost all of my work. Publishing online is another form of backup in a way. My Substack archive is another repository of my work that I could use for retrieval. Okay, next we have quite a new addition actually, an OBSBot Meet 2 webcam. This is about £129 when I bought it. I'm keen to explore live streaming more in 2026 and produce a new round of video tutorials as well. Previously I've relied on a £20 cheaper webcam that I bought during the COVID lockdown for work. Did the job, but it was smudgy and made me look like I was inhabiting a smoke-filled, cigarette-stained Parisian cafe circa 1920. Which, it's kind of cool in some ways, but it's not always the vibe you're going for. After researching a tedious number of alternatives, I ended up getting an OBSBot Meet 2. It's high quality, can switch between 1080 and 4K, has fast focus and works well in low light. It's also tiny. So far I'm very happy with it, it just does the job. Sennheiser profile microphone. This was £88, I think, when I bought it. When I started recording voiceovers for the newsletter, I didn't want to rely on built-in microphones, and I ended up with a Sennheiser profile, which is a small, highly directional, and it plugs into just about anything via USB-C. It's It's what I'm using to record this voiceover. I don't have an ideal recording setup, I should emphasise. I'm just recording this in my dining room. But the Sennheiser manages to make my recordings sound, I think, fairly decent. Hopefully it's not painful for listeners. Let me know if that's not the case. Lastly, a phone is still pretty useful. I have a Google Pixel something or other. It does the job. I keep the apps on it as stripped down as possible and try not to get distracted. I have no social media apps on the thing for a start, the only exception being Substack, but I kind of consider that a necessary business tool, as that's what I use to publish all my stuff. The thing about phones is that for about a decade now, it's been true that more or less any phone will do. I'm not interested in the latest iPhone or the latest and greatest Samsung Android phone. From my position, they are entirely pointless and overpriced. I don't need a supercomputer in my pocket. I just need something that can browse the web, make calls, and otherwise shut the hell up. In fact, I kind of struggle to think of a more boring device than the smartphone. In the late 2000s, it was an exciting concept to have an internet-enabled computer that you could take out and about. In 2026, I want the phone to stay out of my way, unless I want it for something specific. My point being, don't waste money on the fastest, latest, fanciest phone, because phones that were coming out a decade ago could already do everything a writer needs them to do. Okay, that's a big list of stuff. Some of it's quite expensive, some of it is very cheap or free. You absolutely don't need any of it, and if you already write quite happily without leaning on a bunch of tech, that's all good. What's important is to find a process that works for you. The kinds of serials that I like to write have a specific set of requirements, and the tech I've listed here makes it considerably easier for me to do what I do. By making the process less logistically tricky, it gives me more time and brain space to focus on the story itself. Okay, thanks for listening. You can find more and get links to other related bits and bobs over at simonkjones.substack.com.